Our world continues lacking one of its most frequently stated desires: peace. There have been over 14,000 wars in our world over the last 2,000 years. That averages out to a little over 7 wars each year somewhere in the world. Many of those have lasted for years. A few have lasted for decades. The United Nations was created in 1945, just after World War II, to promote world peace. Since its inception, there has not been a single day of peace over the entire world. Somewhere, some country has always been at war with another. That same year, the UN was created. General George Marshall, who at the time was the United States Chief of Staff, voiced an accurate skepticism, stating, if mankind does find the solution for world peace, it will be the most revolutionary reversal of his record we have ever known. That has not happened. And it isn't just nations which have difficulty maintaining peaceable relationships. Individuals do too, even in our closest relationships. About 40% of all marriages in the United States end in divorce, and many of them are ugly. The most common grounds given for divorce is irreconcilable differences. In other words, a husband and wife can no longer get along with each other. They no longer can come to terms and work things out. There is no peace in that household. The conflict usually intensifies during divorce proceedings. Bitter arguments are common. Some couples even refuse to be in the same room with one another, and so they hire lawyers to negotiate the settlement of their divorce. But even that does not ensure peace. Consider, for example, the Cambodian couple who in 2008 split their house literally. He and his friends sawed the house in half after their 40-year marriage ended, and they did so with a handsaw and chisels. Can you imagine cutting a house in half using only hand tools? You have to wonder, right, if he had worked that hard in keeping peace with his wife, they never would have had to come to that point. He had taken the pieces of his house and his half and piled the pieces up on his parents' property and moved in with them until he could reassemble it. They must have been thrilled. She kept her half on the lot it was built on, and here's a picture of it. A house divided, right? Now another couple hoped not to get to that point. They decided to bring a peaceable end to their ongoing conflict. I was wrong, the husband humbly stated. You are right, his wife defiantly countered, and the whole argument started up all over again. Peace. Why is it so difficult for us to maintain? Why did Jesus have to call us to be peacemakers in his Beatitudes, as we read in Matthew 5:9? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Peace is a misunderstood concept. This world's definition of peace usually means the absence of conflict. As long as there is no war, we reason, there must be peace. But we spent decades having no conflict, not being at war with the Soviet Union. Was that peace? Didn't we call it the Cold War? It was marked by distrust and suspicion and poor relationships. It was not peaceable. We believe that anything that prevents conflict is good, and so therefore the word peacemaker is sometimes misapplied. For example, the Peacemaker 6-shooter that the Colt Firearms Company created. They manufactured that gun for a little over 100 years, and I guess you could say that as long as someone was pointing it at another person, that other person was going to be peaceable toward the one who was holding the peacemaker. So I guess you could say it works. In the same line of thought, the peacemaker bomber was created by the United States in the 1950s, and it offered the threat of long-range, massive amounts of bombs that could be dropped on any enemy who may not keep peace with us. And the Peacekeeper missile replaced it. For about 25 years, the United States had several of these in hidden silos underground. Maybe they still do. I don't know. The point is that we are attempting to acquire peace through the threat of greater conflict. Is that really peace? We will never have the absence of conflict in this world. That's why Jesus said this in John 16:33. I have told you these things that in me you may have peace. In the world you have oppression. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Some believe that peace is appeasement. That is, trying to keep the quarrelsome or antagonistic person happy, and then we will have peace. For instance, a man has an explosive temper. His wife and children have learned to walk on eggshells around him and try always to make him happy. They want to keep him in a good mood. That's not peace. It's intimidation. A woman is often moody. Her friends therefore never disagree with her. They go along with every decision she makes in order to keep her from sulking and being resentful. That's not peace. It's manipulation. Our government has tried appeasement as foreign policy. President Obama gave Iran access to $50 billion without congressional approval to try to win their approval, but they are not a peaceable nation to us. President Biden recently allowed the Taliban to set the terms for the withdrawal of American troops and citizens from Afghanistan, leaving them, according to the Boston Globe, $90 billion in U.S. military equipment. It was an attempt to appease them and avoid further conflict. I don't think it's going to work. It isn't peace to give the school bully your lunch money so that he will be nice to you. Neville Chamberlain was British Prime Minister during the 1930s. He's best known for his foreign policy of appeasement. He went to Germany to broker peace with Hitler. He asked what Germany wanted in order to avoid war. The Germans wanted Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain somehow convinced the Czech government to give up some of their land in order to satisfy Germany and keep peace. We know how well that worked. Peace cannot be procured by appeasement. All we do is just continue to give a bully what he or she wants. It's no wonder Jesus indicated there will not be peace in our world. If all we are doing is trying to avoid conflict and appease bullies. We cannot allow the world to define values and truth for us. The world will get that wrong every time. And so we need to look at what the Bible definition, what God's definition of peace is. What did Jesus mean when he called us to be peacemakers? Peace in the Scriptures is a moral value often associated with righteousness. For example, we read this in Psalm 85:10, righteousness and peace kiss each other. They're closely related. There is a connection there. James 3:17 and 18 tells us the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure and then peace-loving. So it's righteous and peaceable. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. A clear connection between peace and righteousness in this scripture. As we see also in Hebrews 12:14, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Righteousness is associated with peace. God's peace includes righteousness, right living, right behavior. If there is really going to be peace, there must be some righteousness, some rightness according to God that peace is based upon. The Hebrew greeting shalom is often interpreted peace, but it really means may you receive God's blessings. Peace means, therefore, to want the best for another person. That kind of peace tears down walls and builds bridges. It overcomes problems and heals division. That's why Paul wrote this in Ephesians 2:14. For Christ himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people when in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. Christ made peace in his church, among his people, by healing division. We see one another as one and the same with us. We are united, therefore we are at peace. Peacemaking is sometimes overlooked as one of the great values, but it is an essential value for Christians to live by. It's God's desire for his people. It's one of the great themes of the Bible. The word peace, that concept is included in every book of the Bible. Every one of Paul's letters that he wrote begins with a wish for peace. Many of them end with his prayer for peace. Peace was the parting wish of Jesus, as we read in John 14:27. I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. And yet, peace has always been difficult, even for God's people. The Jewish people were not peaceable. They hated Gentiles. The word Gentile means anyone who is not a Jew. The Jewish people were racist to the extreme. They were elitist. They believed that God loved only them. God didn't love and value other people. Therefore, they didn't love and value other people. They were not at peace with anyone except their own countrymen. But we're not much different. Peace is not natural for us either. We tend toward division. We tend to form an us versus them mentality when someone upsets us, when someone turns against us, when someone does something that offends us. We consider that relationship disposable. We don't need those kinds of friends. We don't need that kind of spouse. We'll toss them aside and find someone else. We're not predisposed to be peaceable. And so, therefore, peace distinguishes God's people. Peaceableness sets God's people apart from the rest of the world. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said. They will be called the sons of God. And that word Jesus chose to use for sons is not the word for children. It's instead the word that means one who is in the likeness of another. It's the word that was used of James and John when they were called the sons of thunder. They had thunderous personalities. They tended to explode in their temper. Barnabas was called the son of encouragement. He was a great uplifter, a great supporter, a great encourager. He had the likeness of encouragement stamped on his personality. God calls us, Jesus calls us to be peacemakers, and as such, therefore, the sons of God. For God himself is a God of peace. Many scriptures indicate that, like some of these that will scroll across your screen as examples. We are to bear that likeness of his nature, the God of peace. We are his children, and therefore to live as peacemakers. So don't stir up strife, dissension, discontent. If you have a negative opinion about someone, and you will, keep it to yourself. Don't use it to stir up contention in others. Don't use it to be a wall, build a wall between yourself and that person. Instead, be a peacemaker. Forgive the conflict and disagreements that we will all have with one another. Let those disputes go. Leave it in the past and just move on. Don't let them define the relationship you have with someone else. Learn to live in harmony with everyone and be a peacemaker. Is there someone with whom you need to be at peace? Someone with whom you feel at odds with? Don't wait for them to make the first move. Take the initiative. Begin by praying for that person. Pray for their well-being. Pray for shalom in their life, God's blessings to be poured out upon them. And then take the initiative to repair any damage done. And do that without insisting on an apology from that person, either first or anywhere during that process. Be the bigger person. Take the higher road. Value peace over your pride. In his second inaugural address as the Civil War was ending, Abraham Lincoln urged the nation to practice, in his words, malice toward none and charity toward all. It was a call for peace. He was directly addressing the northern people and encouraging them to not allow this rebellion, this civil war, this hatred that had just ended to cause division in the nation between them and citizens in the South. He was calling the northern people to be amicable and peaceable towards Southerners. The day the war ended, there was a great celebration at the White House. Crowds gathered. A military band played. It was a time of happiness. But rather than lashing out at the South in his speech, Lincoln spoke about the horrors of war and the need for reconciliation. And as he closed his speech, he asked the band to play a closing song. They expected to play the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which had been the theme song of the Union Army, as a further celebration of their victory over the South. But instead, President Lincoln asked them to play Dixie, the theme song of the Confederate Army. He explained, they aren't our enemies anymore. We are one people again. And so are we in Christ's church. One people. Let's live as peacemakers. Our greatest need for peace, as important as it is that we have it with one another, is actually peace with God. Romans 5:10 indicates that our sin makes us enemies of God. We're not unfamiliar with that concept, are we? As terrible as it might sound. For we often might wonder about a dying person whose faith is in question. Did he make peace with God? That's often the question I ask the survivors as I am helping them plan a funeral service for someone who I do not know, someone who did not have a church home. Did he make peace with God at the end? For we realize that without doing so, there will be no resting in peace. There will be no peace in eternity. But the good news is we can all be reconciled to God through Jesus, who came as the Prince of Peace and calls us to peace. Peace with God and peace with one another. I encourage you to be peacemakers.